Hi, this is Brett Sankis. I am a business attorney and business consultant. A while back, I wrote an article called Trump Won't Kill America, Bitcoin Will. And the gist of the article was about the decreasing relevance of the nation state. It was written from the perspective of me and you, the average individual, and whether or not what we get from our country and whether or not we need our country or nation state going forward. So there's four main things that a lot of experts will talk about are things that the nation state controls and provides to its people. And those are guns, money, land, and tribe. And my point was that Bitcoin fulfills that money role. And that had been on my mind for years, just years, that the human story, I believe, is a progressive march towards greater and greater freedom. And the current iteration of this, the prevailing paradigm is the nation state. And life in the United States in the 21st century is not bad, right? I mean, it's compared to our ancestors, life's fairly comfortable, but it's still highly controlled. We're controlled. We're within this border. We're controlled by the government. I mean, there's still just a lot of control. And I believe that we needed to centralize in this manner. We need to create nation states and structures and systems and organize in the fashion that we did, a very centralized manner, to get the progress that we've gotten. But now that we're all connected via the internet, and now with decentralization and cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and things, we're able to transact directly. And that has serious implications, I think, on traditional power structures, and whether or not we need this nation state, and whether or not we need centralized players and banks and things like that. That was looking at it from our perspective. Now, some people who responded to the article, which was widely read, I got a lot of good feedback. There was some negative feedback, and it pointed out, I think rightly so, that this is our perspective. It's not the nation state's perspective. So it's not as simple as, hey, right, I have Bitcoin, I don't need US dollars, bye. And I get it, it's not that simple. And that power structures and our government and our nation state the United States is a power structure. And there are people in that power structure who have a very vested interest and aren't interested in decentralization. And that, I understand, from their perspective, they're not going to cede that control very easily. And one of the things people pointed out is that money isn't as simple as, money is a very complex thing. It's not as simple as just this easy tool for trading between people. Money is really an important, critical tool for a sovereignty to be able to exert ultimate authority and independence. So the four things I mentioned are things that we're looking for from a nation state: guns, money, land, tribe. The four elements are things that define a sovereign state are people, government, territory, and control. So people, you gotta have a population, right? You gotta have people who have come together in some manner. You've got to have people to create an economic system and to congregate, so that there's no question you don't have 10-person sovereign states out in the world. That's concentration of population is important. Government, so you've got to have centralization of control and laws and rules. The third is territory, and that was one of the things we look for. It's land, it's physicality. I believe that's becoming less important. We need somewhere to lay our head every night, no question, but we're not many years away from a world where we're spending a lot more time in the matrix, so to speak, than we are in physical land. But nonetheless, we need a place to put ourselves. And so nation states have territory, right? They have borders. And then control is the fourth element. So control is part of the definition of sovereignty. Part of being a sovereign state is the ability to control the people in it. And maybe that sounds crude or isn't the way people talk about sovereignties all the time, but there's no question it's the case. Because if I could just walk away, if the United States exerted zero control over me, then they lack the power that a sovereign state in the modern world expects to have. So the borders, right? A high border, a restrictive border around our country is part of the control that they exert. So it's very interesting because we hear talk about a wall to keep out people from Mexico. Well, walls work in both directions. Walls keep people out, but they also keep people in, right? So our border is effectively not just a boundary, it's a barrier to us going to other places. It's really hard to move around the world. You can get a job in a different place. If you're financially independent, you can move to other countries and sort of buy into their system. But for the average individual, it's not really reality. And so that control means we can't leave. That means even if we're fed up with our government, as a lot of people are, it's like the better bad choice. Well, I'll vote for this person because they're terrible. It's like, but we can't vote with our feet and we can't leave. So the sovereign states gain a lot by having tall or high borders. We can't move around. And then when it comes to money is a really interesting tool that keeps power concentrated in those who have it. And that includes our government and our nation state. It also includes, you've heard a lot about the 99 and the 1% of a video about the widening income gap that you should check out. It's scary stuff, but kind of an optimistic view of how it's all going to go eventually. But there's no question that's widening, and that the people with the power, money is a tool to control. It creates opaqueness in the system. It's fungible and it seems accessible. People think they can get a little more of it, improve their station in life. But meanwhile, the people who have concentrated wealth and power are really hoarding that, and the beauty of compounding interest and other things just means they continue to gather more resources. And money, I feel like, is a tool that makes it less obvious about who controls everything in the world. And the ability of a sovereignty to tax its people comes from its ability to control their currency. And Bitcoin, and part of the reason I wrote about it, portends to me a future that's much more decentralized, where we have a lot less need from our country, and they have a lot less control of us. Now, I'm not an anarchist. I don't believe we should all be in isolation. I believe humans are meant to connect and to congregate, but I believe in a world instead of 195 states, sovereign states, where we're born into one and we can't choose, we'll have tens of thousands, maybe millions, and we'll be able to freely choose the tribe we want. And that's a world that's a competitive, open world that can only lead to greater progress and growth and happiness, because right now we can't leave, right? The balance of power, or it's very hard. The balance of power really is in the hands of our nation state, because it's not easy to vote with our feet and say we're just unhappy. You can stop voting, which, although you don't see it at national elections because they're like the Olympics, they're once every 4 years, it's a big deal for everyone. If you look at local election turnouts, it's incredible how they've fallen off a cliff in the past 50 years. Incredible. And that's because people are just kind of apathetic. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But being able to vote with your feet, being able to have a border that didn't function as a barrier would be really important. And then when it comes to money, probably the best example I can give you is Venezuela, where they had crazy, rampant inflation. And if you had turned in some of your Venezuelan currency, I don't even know what it is, but if you had, before all that happened, if you had bought Bitcoin or even US dollars or something, or gold or silver, and kind of decoupled from the system, you would have had a lot more flexibility and independence when that all happened. Because in rampant inflation, when you're caught in the system, you got nowhere to go. Like everything you have, it happens in the United States, and I believe it eventually will with the way we're printing money, but everything you have is denominated in US dollars. You're just sort of stuck in this same system. And the system, by the way, like the US government can't go bankrupt. I mean, it could choose to go bankrupt, but you can never be forced to go bankrupt, because they have this ultimate power called monetary sovereignty to just print more dollars. And that doesn't mean it's without cost. There's no question in my mind that we've devalued the dollar, and that's another reason that cryptocurrencies or hard assets like gold and silver are attractive. It's a way to lock us into a system, to control us, to link our fortunes, but meanwhile, the fortune is sort of like, for most people, slipping away, whatever they do have, and into the hands of the haves. And I think of it like this giant game of Monopoly. And what happens at the end of Monopoly? Someone wins. I mean, they have all the wealth, and that's kind of what capitalism does. But meanwhile, you also have the government who, it can kind of change the rules and control things and print more money. So, right, you're never going to beat that person. And I'm not looking at it like we're trying to beat our government. It's just more like, in terms of the human experience and having freedom, control is a big deal. And our nation states exert tremendous control over us. It's very hard to step outside of that system. So that thrills me when I see cryptocurrencies and decentralization in these things, because again, it's not about anarchy, and it's not because I think life is terrible. I have a pretty good life. It's that I think that we are meant to be more free than we are today, and change and progress and increased happiness and freedom are super, super exciting to me. So I'm interested in what you think about these things. So if you think I'm crazy, tell me. If you think I'm spot on, tell me twice. We got to drown out the people who think I'm crazy. But I'm really interested in your view of this conversation, where it's all going, and what you think about Bitcoin and decentralization and the future of the nation state. So thanks for joining me today.